formalizing the equation y equals a times x minus m times x plus or minus n. So this is another form. We call this, what does it say on your yellow sheet? What is this called? Factored form. Does it look factored to you? Yeah. Remember from when we factored last year? So that's factored form. Remember x minus 2, x plus 2, for example? That's factored form. Okay, so we've on your yellow sheet that I gave you, it goes through each kind, general, standard, and factored. So we're going to investigate, okay, what's so special about factored form and what does it tell us? So let's figure out if we have, remember factored form is x minus m times x minus n. So again, that minus sign you have to be careful of. So here, what would be my m value? 2, right? And your n value would be 8, opposite sign. Think of it this way. If I plugged in x as 2, it's what would give you 0. So 2 minus 2 would give you 0. 8 minus 8 would give you 0. Okay, next guy. No. So it's because the formula has -2, +6. Okay, the next guy. -2, -6. Okay, how about this? How about the first guy? What would make him 0? 0. 0, and because you're not adding or subtracting 0. Anything, your x minus 0 is just x. And then what would the other one be? +4. And last one, this first guy would be -8, +10, opposite sign. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to graph these guys on your calculator. So grab your graphing calculator. Go to y equals. And we're going to start by graphing the first one, x minus 2, x minus 8. We want to figure out, okay, what is this m and n? What do they do on this graph? X minus 2, x. Now, if somebody doesn't have a calculator, just share with somebody right now. So, Spencer, okay, you want to share together? Just put your desks together. Isabel? X minus 8. Okay, because you need to have a graphing calculator. You can always use minimum and maximum. But we just want to figure out when it's in this form, what do these m and n mean? Are they anything special? So remember the numbers 2 and 8. Okay, doesn't mean anything when your graph looks like that. So how do we zoom 6? I know. 2 and 8, interesting. Where do we see that 2 and 8? It's your x-intercepts. So what would be your x-intercepts of your graph? 2 and 8. Okay, y-intercept. How would you get your y-intercept? Second trace. Ooh, that might work. Can you see your y-intercept? No. So you might have to zoom out. So how do we zoom? Zoom 3, enter. Now, it's pretty hard to read what that is, right? Now, what do we know about the x-intercept, or the y-intercept? What is equal to 0 then? X is 0. So, to get our y-intercept, that's when x is 0. So we can just push trace 0, enter, and they'll give me the y value at that point. So trace 0, enter. 16. You did not get that. So did you want to try again? Trace 0, enter. 16. Okay. Where would be the axis of symmetry? You don't know. Well, let's think about this. Look at our x-intercepts. We're at 2 and 8. What do we know about the axis of symmetry? It's through the middle of the curve. Yeah. So if we have an x-intercept of 2 and an x-intercept of 8, and we know the axis of symmetry cuts it in half, could you figure out what's halfway between 2 and 8? Yeah. How would we do that? What would be halfway between 2 and 8? Jesse? No, you had it. Halfway. Okay. How would you find the middle number between two numbers? Whenever. Add them and divide by 2. So 8 plus 2, I don't know. So 5. The distance is 3 away, 3 away. Right? That was not so hard. Okay, let's look at another one. So take your calculator. Y equals x plus 2 and x minus 6. Okay, so let's go zoom standard. Zoom 6. So 2, remember we said negative 2 and 6. Those are m and n values, and there also are x-intercepts at negative 2 and 6. Okay, how would you get your y-intercept? Trace, 0, enter, negative 12. Okay, how do we get yeah, Tim? Right? Nope. As long as it's in this form, factored form, that's always our x-intercepts. Okay, so how do we get the axis of symmetry if our intercepts are at negative 2 and 6? Negative 2 plus 6 divided by 2. Negative 2 plus 6 is 4, divided by 2 is 2. So x equals 2 is the axis of symmetry. You should write that x equals 5, x equals 2, right, for axis of symmetry. The next part, let's graph him to get our y-intercept. Could you also just plug it into the equation? Notice how, what's negative 2 times negative 8? 16. 2 times negative 6? Negative 12. Why? Because our x-intercept is when, our y-intercept is when x is 0. So 0 plus 2 times 0 plus 6, which is to be 12. Okay, so what's our axis of symmetry? How would we get it? Negative 2 plus negative 6, negative 8 over 2, which is negative 4. So you would write that as x equals negative 4. Okay, next one. What would be my x-intercepts? 0, 4. Oops. 0 and 4. What would be your y-intercept? Negative 4. Because 0 times, actually, would it be? 0 times 0 minus 4? 0. 0. Okay, and your axis of symmetry? 0 plus 4 divided by 2? 2. So x equals 2. The 2 will always be a positive. Which one? Axis of symmetry? Oh, this? Yeah, because whenever you're averaging. Yeah, yeah. Okay, your x-intercepts, if m was negative 8, 10 was negative 8 and 10. So we set x to 0. 0 plus 8 times 0 minus 10, negative 80 for our y-intercept. And axis of symmetry, average our intercepts. Negative 8 plus 10 is 2 divided by 2 is 1. So x equals 1. Yeah, because whenever you're averaging, right, we're taking the average of the two numbers. So if I was averaging 3 numbers, then you would divide it by 3. Because you're averaging 2 numbers, so you're going to divide by 2. Okay. Okay, so what did you notice? The x-intercepts were m and n. The x-intercepts are m and n. The y-intercept, how did we get the y-intercept? Or, what do we do with those two numbers? Multiply them. The y is m times n. And the axis of symmetry, what do we have to do? Add divided by 2. So m plus n over 2. Okay? Sorry. And this, so on your yellow sheet in factored form, you could also add here where it says, if you just go, I'll go back to that in a second. Factored form, so the vertex, sorry, the y value, where is it? I didn't add in y-intercept, did I? So y-intercept, you can add this in. The y-intercept is equal to m times n. M times n. And the x-intercepts are m and n. Can we go back now? Yeah? Nope. No. Shh. Jesse, you need to stop being rude to people. Don't put down. Okay? Okay, turn the page over. I want you to fill in as much of that chart as you possibly can. Right now, the m and the n's and the a's. The a is the number in front of the brackets. Yep. Okay. So the a, so we're comparing it to this formula here. Our a value is the number in front of the brackets. Okay. So in this first one, 2. What's your m value? Because the formula has a minus in it, the actual m value is 5. Right? Because x minus 5. So 5 and 2. This one? Negative 1. Yeah, as long as it's in this form x minus, right? If we ever have like a number minus x, then we'll have to change it to look like this form. So what are the x-intercepts then? 5 and 2. The y-intercept would be, is it this time? But there's an a in front. So we should go back to that yellow sheet. Where is this? No, there you go. So when you wrote in your y-intercept is m times a. Remember this? We should add in one other times a times a. It's going to be 20. Okay, so back to this. Because it'd be plugging x in 0, 2 times 0 minus 5 times 0 minus 2. Now, which way would this graph open? Up, smiley face, because a is positive. A is positive. Yeah. Okay, next one. Because if we plug in x is 0, 0 minus 5 times 0 minus 2, we get 2 times negative 5 times negative 2. So positive 20. Okay? What's your A value for the next guy? 4. So he's going to open smiley face. What's your M value? -3 and +2. So the intercepts are -3 and 2. Can you see, Stacy? Do you need to move over somewhere? Okay, because here are x-intercepts. And we just need to switch the sign. So your y-intercept, so if we plug in our x is 0 into our equation, so 4 times 0 plus 3 times 0 minus 2. Could we not do 4 times -3 times 2? Yeah. M times N times A. So -24. Okay, so can you fill in the rest of this chart? Give it a shot. All right, so what did you get for your y-intercept for the third one? -150. Good, because M times N times A, or just plug in x is 0. For the third one, what did you get as your y-intercept? 0. Anything times 0 is 0. How about the next guy? +30 and +100. Yeah, and the first 3 open up, the second 3 open down. Because of the negative A value, it opens down. And then just double check your x-intercepts. You got the same thing? Good to go on? Okay, complete the following. The x-intercepts are M and N. The y-intercept was A times M times N. If A was positive, the graph opens AMN, yeah, you can. And A is negative, the graph opens down. Oh yeah, you could totally write man. Oh yeah. Oh, M times A times N. Okay, let's move on. So here's some summary. Let's keep going because this is all review. If A is positive, remember we have a minimum value. If A is negative, we're going to have a max value. And y-intercept is man. Right? X. So that's the same step. So let's move on. So it says, without graphing, state the x-intercepts, the y-intercept, and the equation of the axis of symmetry, and whether it opens up or down. So let's go through each point together. So first, what is the x-intercepts? -4, +10. So -4 and +10. So -4, comma, +10. The A value? A value. So the y-intercept will be the y-intercept. Negative, right? M times N times A. So -4 times 10 is -40 times 1. -40. Good. What else do they want us to find? Axis of symmetry. How do we get the axis of symmetry? The average of our x-intercept. So -4 plus 10 divided by 2. So, well, -4 plus 10 is 6. 6 divided by 2 is 3. How would you write that, the axis of symmetry? X equals 3. And last, the direction of the opening? Opening up. Why is it up? Positive A value in front of the brackets. This is a positive A. Okay, why don't you try, let's do B. You try B. Okay, what's your x-intercept? -6 and -9. Y-intercept? So how did you do that? -2A times M times N. -108. Oh, this is -6, -9 here. Okay, so man, M-A-N. So -6 times -9 times the -2. So we basically just have to plug in x is 0 into your equation. Axis of symmetry, -6 plus -9 divided by 2. In your calculator, you have to be careful. You have to put brackets around. So -6 plus 9, or -9, you have to put brackets, then divide by 2. So you should get -7.5. Okay, so you have to put that brackets. So how would you write that equation? No, but how would you write your x equals -7.5? Opening, up or down? Negative a value, it's opening down. Sad face. Okay, next guy. What's your 0 and 20 would be your x-intercepts. Y-intercept would be 0, because 0 times the -1 times 20. So 10, because 0 plus 20, so x equals 10. And thank you, Jesse, opening down. Okay, good. You guys are good. You're doing really well. Okay, so what's the difference between these two graphs? Disguise a value. The 3 and the x are switched in one of them. So they look the same, but the 3 and x are switched. Are switched, or opposite sign. Or opposite signs. And -2 out front, or as the a value. So explain why this guy here appears to, it actually opens up, but by looking at the a value, it says it opens down. Why? What's actually wrong there? Do you know why? Well, it's quite simply, we can factor a negative out. Factor a -1 out. So if we factored a -1 out, we get the proper a value. Because what happens if we factored a -1 out of this? It switches the signs, right? So you're left with -2 times the -1 that we're going to factor out. And so a +3 actually becomes -3, and a negative x becomes positive x. So we actually could write this instead as x minus 3. So it's actually going to be -2 times -1, +2. So that's why the formula has to have the x first. If not, we have to factor the negative out. Okay, because the formula is x minus m, not m minus x. If there was, then you could leave it, right? So the second one we could leave, because if the x wasn't negative, then we're good to go. So if you had -7 plus x, you could just rewrite that as x minus 7. It's the same thing. Okay? All right, next, so this guy, it says write each function in the proper form. So who's the one written wrong? The first one. So we're going to factor out a -1. And so this becomes what, Dean? We factor -1 out. It's going to become x minus 1, because there's signs. Is this guy okay? Yeah? Okay, so moving on. Now we have it in the proper, now can we state the x and y intercepts? Yes. What's our x-intercept? +1 and +10. So our y-intercept are those two numbers multiplied together times the a value. 1 times 10 times -1 is -10. Okay. Next guy, who's in the wrong order? Both of them. So we're going to have to factor a negative out of both of them. going to factor out a negative 1 out of him and a negative 1 out of. So we're going to factor a negative 3 times. We're going to times it by the negative 1 for this guy, and it becomes x minus 4. Factor out the negative for that guy. We're left with x minus 4. So what can... x plus 4.
So we're just basically switching.
Oh, it's a 12. Sorry. Yeah, we're just switching it around.
We don't have to put -1, right?
Well, technically not. Well, why do you mean? Because what's negative 3 times negative 1 times negative 1? Exactly. You go straight to negative 3 times x minus 4 times x minus 12. Yeah. Okay, so what's the x-intercept? Positive 4 and positive 12. Shh. Okay. Y-intercept. How do we get the y-intercept? Spencer? How do we get the y-intercept? 4 times 12 times negative 3. What does that equal? One 40.
-144 is 2 off.
Here's yeah. Very good though. Okay, moving on. It says match each graph to the corresponding equation. So let's look at the equation. Equation 1, x-intercept should be what? +1, -4, and opening, which direction? Up or down? Up. So who has an x-intercept of 1 and -4? 1 and -4.
Can we just graph it? It's G.
D. 1 and -4 are x-intercepts. Here we go. 1 and -4, and it opens up. So graph D. Oh, the axis is actually over here. It's hard to see. Here and here. Okay, so what's wrong with this equation? Where do you have to factor the negative out of? 4 minus x. And this one could be, is the x negative? Is it? Is the x negative? Look at the sign in front of the x. It's positive, so how else could you write this? That one's okay. X plus 1, it's this guy with the negative x.
All members of the girls soccer team, please dismiss at 2:45.
So y equals, so here, do we have to factor a -1 out of this guy? Isabel? Why? Why do we have to factor a -1 out? Anyone? Because the x is negative. Yeah, and on the wrong side. So putting the -1 out front, this becomes x x minus 4. We're switching both the signs when we factor negative out. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I just rewrote. You just rewrote it. Yeah, because the x was positive, so that one was okay. Yeah. Okay, so what's our x-intercepts? -1, +4. And opening up or down? Down. Okay, so this time it has to be C or B. -1, +4 is our intercepts. Here's the axis. It's hard to see. And here's the x-axis here. So where is -1 and 4 as an x-intercept? B, -1, +4. So B. Okay? What's the x-intercept of this guy, Dean?
What?
X-intercept, 3.
-1.
Yeah. 4 and opening? Opening?
Up.
Up. so that has to be A. It's the only one left opening up. The last one is C. Well, we could go through it again if you want. Okay. Keep going. Let's get through the rest really quickly. No, we're finishing this off. Let's just see if we need to go through this question. Yes, we do. Okay, what's the value of m and n? 3 and 6. Okay, explain how to determine the value of a. How could we figure out the value of a? Okay, well let's think about it this way. Do we have a formula for the y-intercept? What did it equal to? Man. Or a times m times n. Do we know our y-intercept? Yeah? It's 36. Would equal to our a times 3 times 6. So what does that 36 equals? What's 3 times 6? 18a. Now what? Divide by 18. Make sure you're getting this down. 2. So 2 equals a. So we're going to use our y-intercept. So use y-intercept equals a times m times n. Okay. Okay, so now we can write the equation. So y equals, our a value was 2, x minus m, so x minus 3 times x minus 6. So what would be the vertex? How would we get the vertex? Well, we want this minimum value. Now, I want you to look at your yellow sheet. To get the vertex, look at this. To get the vertex, in factored form, first determine the axis of symmetry. Okay, find the axis of symmetry because then we know the x value of our vertex, and then we can plug it into the original to get the y value. Okay, so how do we get the axis of symmetry? So axis of symmetry, 3 plus 6 divided by 2, which is 9, or divided by 2, which is 4.5. So the x value is 4.5. And now we need the y value. So we're going to plug it into our equation to get the y value. So y equals 2 times, our x is what number? We know this is 4.5. We need to figure out the y value. So 4.5 minus 3 times 4.5 minus 6. So you could also use a trace feature if this was graphed on your calculator, or just type this in. 2 times 4.5 minus 3 is 1.5. And then times 4.5 minus 6, negative 1.5, and get negative 4.5. Okay, so what is that as a point? Yeah, x was 4.5, y was negative 4.5. Okay, so can we write it in standard form now? So let's write it in standard. What do you need to be able to write it in standard form? What does h and k stand for? H and K, what is your H and K? From x and y of what? Of your vertex. So our equation is y equals, the a value is still the same. What's our a value? 2x minus 4.5 squared plus negative 4.5. So it's just minus 4.5. Could you also write these as fractions instead? Yeah, 9 over 2, if you wanted to. How do I know what? Oh, because half. Okay, you guys should know that. Okay, last question. Last question. Yeah, we do. Well, it's the same idea as the last question. Okay, right? Do you think, is this really, do you have to be able to do this though? Determine the coordinates of the vertex of the quadratic function. Let's really quickly, so if we were to graph this, where's our x-intercepts? Which one of these are x-intercepts? -8 and 2. So 2 and then -8. And y-intercept is 0 and 48. So way up there. So opening up or down? Has to be down. So it's going up all the way to 48 and down here. So we want to get our axis of symmetry, or our vertex. What point is this? So how did we get that? Okay, well we know our m and n, yeah, but we don't know our a value, right? We need our whole equation in this form. Y equals a times x minus m times x minus n. Yes, we can get our axis of symmetry, but we also need our a value. How do we get our a value? What's the a value equal to? How do we get that? Man, our y-intercept is equal to? Man. Okay, what's our y-intercept? 48 is going to equal to a times, what's our m value? -8 times +2. Okay, so that's -16. What do we do to both sides? Divide by 2. No, divide by -16. 3. -3. Which is good. We expect a negative a value because it's opening down. So what's our equation? A equals -3x, if it's +8, x minus 2. Okay, so now, no, we're not done, because we still would have to, we're going to have to plug it into this equation. We still have to make the equation. So axis of symmetry is 3. How did you get that, Jesse? -8 plus 2 divided by 2, which gives you -6 divided by 2, which equals -3. Okay, so now we know this point here is -3. How do we get the y? Can we plug it into our equation? Yeah, that's why you need your equation. So -3 times -3 plus 8 times -3 minus 2. When you plug that in really quickly, I'll just, well, what is that going to be? What is it? 75. So the point would be -3 comma 75. Okay, so that's as tough as it would get. Yes, so your homework is all 1 to 9. So let's get going.